Welcome everyone to CADAF panel about the role of art in society. My name is Giulia Archetti and I'm part of the CADAF team. And I would like to welcome and thank you our guests today. Vadim, Grygorian, who is a creative director, brand strategist, and an artist. And Francesca Pini, art journalist of Corriere della Sera. I think for us at CADAF, it was really important to have this panel because we strongly believe in the power of art to change and influence society. And we have seen also, I think recently with sort of the various issues that Black Lives Matter sort of brought on, and how also that has created, for example, different types of artworks representing and expressing the emotions that often we cannot express with words. And this is just sort of a recent example. And I know I've asked personally Vadim and Francesca to join me on this panel because I know that they both share these beliefs that art can really change and affect society in a positive way. Not just society, but also businesses, for example. And I wonder, perhaps, so women first, Francesca, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your experience and why, as a journalist, you decided to focus on art, for example, and why do you believe in the power of art? And obviously through your journalism and through your articles, you bring people closer to art. And you've met with a variety of artists. You brought their different way of thinking into words. So yes, it would be great to hear a little bit.
Thank you, Julia. So my father was a collector and my mother was a teacher in art. So I really grew up in a family where the arts were so important as education. And so the first step for me is always education. Education at school, education at university, but you have to have a basis. So for us, maybe in Italy, is very simple, easy, because we grew up in fantastic cities where we have monuments, churches. Inside churches, you find so gorgeous paintings and sculptures. But education is really the most important path that have to be followed. So we can't reduce that part of the growing up of children and new generation. So for me, writing is really a kind of educational purpose, because even if I'm dealing with archaeology, with modern art, with contemporary art, very, very much. But my approach is always not to be on a plinth and to speak to everyone, because everyone should really realize what art is. It's not only beauty, because it's sometimes very beautiful, but it's a way of thinking life, thinking about relationships, thinking about history, thinking about geography, about the world, because this amplifies our connoisseurship of this world and of the other, because we are so plunged into in Occidental culture, and we may have the curiosity of knowing more about the African art, about Oceania, about the American art. So really, it's all your life long is a task of education. So my writing is really linked to this purpose, not to be on a plane, and talk to everybody, because everybody should understand what art is, how art is important to enjoy life and to have better relationships to other cultures.
Yes, I think definitely one of the things that you said, that art brings culture together, or at least it gives us you know, a vision into different cultures, but also it helps express emotions. And you know, emotions are languages, but they are universal languages. Vadim, I wonder if you could also tell us a little bit about your story, because I know that you are an artist now, but you weren't always an artist, and you probably didn't start out wanting to, you know, get into art. So what made you sort of embrace and become a little bit of a spokesperson for art in society?
Well, I think that my story is a little bit different from Francesca's, and I think that we, both of us, we approach probably the importance of art from two different sides, but absolutely believing in the same thing. And unlike Francesca, I'm coming from a family of a very, if you wish, scientifically and engineering minded people. What was at the time Soviet Union, so it was a typical Soviet intelligentsia family. So yes, we were into books, we were into like classic things and museums and things like that. But you know, in the family there was nobody with art background or, you know, art educated, etc. And but I think dragging when my parents and my mom in particular have been dragging me into museums, so that's how my education initially started, and probably the taste for artistic expression. But then I think from early on in my career as a marketeer, later after I did MBA at INSEAD and have been working for one of the biggest CAC 40 listed company, Pernod Ricard, somehow little by little I started feeling with my Armenian nose this role that art plays in the society, and somehow my destiny brought me to this position of becoming a leading this project of for Absolute Vodka. And leading all the art activities of Absolute Vodka internationally, and and you know, this is the brand that actually started it all, meaning the contemporary engagement with art and brands since the collaboration with Andy Warhol in 1985, and since then kind of followed through 850 collaborations, etc., etc. And if you wish, that brought me very close into the absolutely edge of what is contemporary art. And I have been working very closely with Documenta at the time, and Documenta 13 in particular, with Caroline Christoph Bakargiev, famous Italian you know, curator and director of the museum now in Torino, and also Chus Martinez, who is now director of the school in Basel. And both of them, and also all the entourage and all the weeks that I spent at Documenta, really kind of changed my perception and made me absolutely convinced about the role of art. And then, of course, I started reading and education. Francesca, of course, you're right. So, and art is the language. And I think that is one of the things that I try to explain people. Sometimes people also with lots of money, that they reject contemporary art and they say all these kind of usual things. Oh, my kid could could have done this, or take away this bullshit, or why do you put the cigarette into the ass of this woman in the sculpture, etc., etc. And these are, by the way, real comments that I had in my experience. These people, unfortunately, they do not understand that this is the language, and like with any language, it requires a little bit of effort. You know, I know, Giulia, that you do horse riding. I mean, if you, I did once horse riding without training. I mean, I have been hurting for almost 1 month after just doing 1 hour. So the same is with art. If you just get parachuted without any preparation and all of that, it's the language that you do not understand, and it hurts. And it hurts your ego, because oftentimes, you know, people people have success and they have money and all of that, and they sometimes do not understand, and it hurts that they do not understand. And I think here as well, the role of the people like Francesca, but also the role of different art writers, the role of what you do with CADAF, with these popularization, if you wish, of contemporary art, is really, really important. And
sometimes I'm thinking, sorry, sometimes I'm thinking about Van Eyck and a contemporary artist. So if you don't have a background to interpret and to understand what Van Eyck did and what a contemporary artist is doing, you have to know what is the background, because even antique arts, it's not so easy to understand if you don't know, for example, the Bible, or if you don't know some chapters of the history. So not so far.
No, not so far. But I think it's a little bit easier with, if you wish, with classic art, because somehow we do have these references. A lot of people did read Bible. A lot of people did read or heard at least of, you know, the pantheon of gods from ancient Greece, and they know some mythology a little bit, etc. But so from education at school, etc. So it is a little bit easier. Whereas at school now, unfortunately, I mean, look, the classes that I see, you know, nowadays of art classes at school, this is pitiful. This is like the least important thing. It never counts in overall grade. It is given to very secondary, unsuccessful artists, or some bad curators, or even just total failures in whatever domains. Of course, there are exceptions, don't get me wrong, but in general, there is no prestige associated with that. There is no...
with art education, yeah.
With art education, it is like really, yes, French, for example, or English, or mathematics, it's always, though nowadays, and I really talk because I have one hand or one foot in the world of business and branding and marketing and all of that, and then another foot as artist. I really see how powerful is the language of art, how powerful is the messages that art brings, and this is something that I really, and Giulia, you know very well, that I advocate this at INSEAD, which, if some people don't know, it's one of the leading business schools in the world, that I advocate the really bringing art to the table of these future top managers in the educational context, because without that, we are just wasting time on this earth. You know, we leave the lives that are a little bit sad and you know, uninteresting. And here I would like to cite famous Russian movie director Andrei Tarkovsky, and he did an absolutely beautiful movie that I recommend to everybody, called Andrei Rublev. Andrei Rublev was the kind of Renaissance icon painter and in Russia. And when doing the commentary about this movie, he said that art is an absolute necessity of our life, because without art, life would be unbearable. And I think that that's idea of this necessity of art for the people is absolutely fundamental. And I think that, if you wish, I'm a little bit happy about some elements of the COVID situation, because it almost take away a little bit of this foam of meaninglessness, and people are looking for meaning and searching for it. Just 3 days ago, I had a WhatsApp message from a friend of mine in Venice, who lives in Venice, and he at midnight, he sent me a very short voice message, and he was screaming. He said, "Vadim, where is the meaning? Where is the meaning, Vadim?" And it was almost like an angelic voice of this young person that, and I think that a lot of people, we either consciously or subconsciously, we're desperately looking for meaning, and art is meaning search mechanism par excellence. This is the, especially in Western, but not only Western, also China, quite secular world in which we live today. This is absolutely almost like a religious, space to to understand who are you, what is your relationship to the world, with the other, with these, that, how do I understand my body, how do I understand the relationship to life, to death, like some basic fundamental questions. Today, you almost the only place where you can find it is within the gallery space, within the museum space, within the art fair space, etc., etc. And I think that because
can I stop
fair,
you?
Yeah.
Can I stop you for a second? Well, then, one of the things that I wanted to ask you both is actually, and then what do you think about the changes that COVID brought, i.e., art definitely moving into more digital world. I'm not talking about digital art per se, but actually museum expanding their online, three-dimensional sort of visit, art fairs online with sort of viewing rooms. So seems to be a lot of offering, but of course, we couldn't go to the museum, we couldn't experience art like we did before. So my question is, was this a positive thing? Did, in a way, COVID got people closer to art, because within the confined walls of their homes, they had access to this, and now hopefully that slowly we are trying to go back to a life that seems or resembles what we used to have. Would it be a positive thing for art? Will people have discovered the power of art more?
So 2 days ago, I was in Venice during the weekend, and thousands of people were queuing, visiting museums and churches. So because they needed, after having had this new approach to the digital world, this will be a parallel world. Will stay forever.
Meaning the online option,
the online,
digital,
digital and the online. Now it's a parallel world. So I think it's very interesting, because when you are at home, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, you want to see the MoMA or you want to see the Mona Lisa. You go Google Arts. You can have it very close to your eyes. But then you need really to be inside a gallery or inside a museum to have the personal experience, and it's a kind of nutrition. that you need. But it's a parallel word. And talking to Mark Queen a couple of days ago, this will be my next interview published on Friday this week. So he continuously spoke about recalibrating. And I said, what do you think about the accelerated world where we were living in three months ago? And he said, well, we were like addicted. So in fact, talking with him about this recalibrating life, recalibrating the art world in a different way, so we can have more options. Recalibrating, for example, he said, well, during the lockdown, I went back to my practice. I stretches the canvas. So I prepared my colors, so without assistance. So I think it's a positive side, because the virus acted like a hacker. It was a hacker in our society, in our world, in our lives. We discovered, for example, how important was to have access to the digital world, and museums like the Tate, for example. Well, the Tate has many interesting, has an interesting platform, digital platform. But of course, seeing the Warhol show, it was fine. It was a conversation, it was a talk, but when you are inside a gallery or a museum, you really have this, how to say, it's physical. It's really physical. So we have to combine these two words. The physical and the virtual, they goes together. There is no kind of separation. They can go together. We can have more option, and when you have more option is positive.
I agree, Francesca, and I think that let's not forget that the physical experience of art was very limited for most of the human history. I mean, one of the I was always, for example, fascinated by some of the philosophers that you know, like Kant, that develop aesthetic theory without visiting any single museum, and he just and probably never seeing actually paintings in reality, probably in some books, probably actually in some engravings, etc., etc. But without so today digital could provide a much better you know, encounter with art than existed in the times of Kant, you know, and him, it did not preclude from making some breakthrough ideas that changed the aesthetic theory for centuries to come. So I think that it is positive, and I think that if some people, and honestly, I discovered like amazing things that LACMA has a collection of beautiful videos that I never visited. I never had time. I never, you know, and I watched like 10 of them, and I invited my kids to watch. Is 5 minutes beautiful, like Mike Bradford or Baldassare. 5 minutes on Baldassare. Bam, cool, interesting. You know, so all of that is good, and hopefully a lot of us, we developed positive habits out of that.
What?
More options.
Yes, exactly. I mean, definitely more option. And my personal hope is that the people that were not interested in sort of art before sort of discovered what art could offer, because of, you know, so 24 hours in a day, when you are confined in one space, you know, if you can go out and do a lot of things, you might prefer to do something else, but, you know, then you might even explore a museum and, as you say, discover what's out there that will bring sort of people closer to art. But, you know, we've been talking about just now museums and galleries and art fairs. what is your view on public art, for example?
Oh, wow. Public art. Mhm. More public art. More public art, because it's a way of approaching new audiences. It's a way of opening the perception mind and perception of everyone. And so I'm very careful when I'm looking at public art, because normally it's not so chosen. It's not chosen very well. It's just a piece that you put in a square or you put in a building, and that's wrong, because the role of public art should be completely different. We know, for example, the famous sculpture of Kapoor that provoked a lot of discussion, and but you know, it's not like putting an object in a place. No, this should be really a different thinking. What is public art? And we know today, Black Lives Matter, what is happening all over the world, because they dismantled a lot of statues and monuments because they were dedicated to slaves, to conquerors, and so ethical monuments, so to say. We should not replace. How can we replace these kind of statues and sculptures? We can do completely differently. For example, the fourth plinth, Trafalgar Square, London, in front of the National Gallery. I think they did they had a very good idea, but it's rotating sculpture on the fourth plinth. So no, the monument is really too much. It's very fixed, and maybe today we as society, we are a liquid. We became a liquid. We are becoming more and more a liquid society. So we want to share. We want to have different perception. And so the fact of having a rotating platform where you can put different sculptures. This could be as the fourth plinth in front of the National Gallery. It's a good idea, for example. But
absolutely. And I think that you know, I work quite closely with Parisian Metro, and I'm doing some artistic direction for let's say a train station that is going to be open in a couple of years. And I did recently the audit of years of public art, you know, in Parisian Metro, from Guimard, you know, opening to the kind of very contemporary projects of Ottoniel and Tobias Rieberg, etc. And one of the striking things that is coming from that audit is that what I found out, that people inside the organization of RATP, all these, you know, thousands of workers that doing very important, but, you know, basic jobs in Metro, they have pride when a station has art. They really would like to, they feel better, they feel more engaged. And there was an example when on one of the stations they did with tiles, they did big artwork, and they give as gifts to some of the workers these little tiles separately. They were fighting for them. They wanted, even though they didn't know the artist, I mean, a very good artist and everything, but they just wanted to be part of that. They feel that their job is elevated. It's one hand, and then the users of the Metro, they said, whenever there are riots in Paris, whenever there, and you know, Parisians, they love all kinds of demonstrations.
They love their riot.
no, we know it.
You give them pretext or without pretext,
Gilets jaunes.
national sport. So whenever they go, they break elevator, they break this, they break that, equipment, etc. There was never, they never touched art pieces in the metro, never. I think in the history of Metro, there was only one or two cases when they put some tags, I think it Louvre station or something. But apart from that, there was absolutely zero thing. And when you think of, for example, I mean, again, bringing back Italy, in Napoli, the Metro of Napoli, which is
fantastic metro.
We invite everyone to go if we can, or if they can travel, to go to Naples, yes, and go to the metro.
I can give you a tip. Karim Rashid, he did the metro station at the Università. So when you are looking at these sculptures in the metro at the station Università, you will see two profiles. And these kind of profiles, they are quite similar to a famous sculpture of Mussolini did by Bertelli at that time, and was one of the most famous sculpture of Mussolini, Continuo Profilo del Duce. So it's a fantastic station, but when I'm taking the metro there, I'm always thinking about this sculpture of Mussolini, which is a very famous sculpture and very, very beautiful as well. So the artists, they did a fantastic work in Naples. And the last one is of Anish Kapoor, and there are still some big problems, but hopefully one day.
But I think if we, without looking at different works and stations or whatever sculptures, I think in general, putting art just in front of the people, I think this is great. I do not quite agree with Francesca on the fact that you should kill the statues of the former slaves, etc., because I think that it's wrong. I think it's good that
I don't want to kill the statues.
Oh no, sorry, but I think that all kinds of human expression, if it is qualitative, it is important. It is telling of our times. It is telling of our feelings. It is telling of human intentions, and it is also educating everyone, because once you are passing by, maybe not everyone, but somebody is going to ask the question, who is Anish Kapoor? And another one is going to look and would say, who is this one? Who is that one? Etc. Maybe Google, maybe. And I think that you can start by this thing. I remember when we did research for Absolute and this campaign with artists that Absolute did many years ago, a lot of curators today and museum directors told me, I went to study art because of Absolute, because on the cover of a magazine, I saw some advertising. I have been putting them on the wall in my dormitory, and I discovered who is Keith Haring, who is Louise Bourgeois, who is Ed Ruscha, who is Damien Hirst, you know, when he was young, and I think the brands could afford him, etc., etc. So, exactly, and I think that brands also have absolute role here to play, and I use this term cultural agent. I believe that brands have to become also not only cities, not only kind of states that create public art, but also brands, because to some extent it is public art, and they can bring art in one way or another to the people, and I think this is great, this is needed, this is expected. And what Parisian Metro is doing here, but you know, in Napoli, it's one thing, but also you know, we might like or not like, even all in all, I'm quite criticizing, for example, the collaboration of Kunz and Vuitton, because I've got my marketing questions and all of that. But all in all, a girl from China, from Russia, who is buying this bag, maybe 10% of them are gonna, you know, again, Google who is Jeff Koons and why, or Kusama, or it's, and I think, you know, you please don't laugh, but I discovered who is Murakami because of Louis Vuitton. You know, years, I think it was 18 years ago, etc.
A long time ago, yeah.
I discovered who is Richard Prince, who is quite important artist. You know, I was like, who is this? Why there's, you know, doing this collaboration, etc. And then, oh wow, oh, etc. Okay, maybe not everybody did this work, but at least some would do. So I think it is fundamental to engage art in the maximum domains of our lives, because once again, life becomes much richer, much more interesting, and much more meaningful. And going back to the beginning of our conversation, that many people in the COVID realized that why they wake up and go to work, why they do this and that, why they, a lot of things have appeared a little bit meaningless. And so I think that thanks to art and thanks to approaching art in whatever way is possible, I think it is all positive and all good. And
thinking about the walls, now the Gucci walls, for example, there's a collaboration between Gucci and Catalan as well, no? And these Gucci walls, they go towards the street art, and street art nowadays is really very, very popular. And many collectors, they want to buy street artists, and this was not the case many years ago, no? So the street art was, they looked at street art as a phenomenon. And now, for example, Invader, yeah, you know, was the mosaic.
Yeah, 2000.
They wanted to buy. So I think we have to gain more and more new audiences.
Well, that comes to sort of my question about the audience also.
Windows shops become a sort of gallery. Yeah, it's not a gallery, but when you go along a street and you see in a window shop, you see a beautiful painting and a bag, for example, or a dress, and you look at how beautiful it is. So you educated your eyes.
Yes. Well, I'd say that outside of sort of the specific art world, I think the easiest link for art was the luxury world, perhaps, to try and connect with luxury, hence all this sort of collaboration, which I agree with you. I think they are very useful to certainly spark sort of curiosity in someone who is not interested in going to the museum, maybe did not study art. Because it is also true that maybe sometimes for us who have studied art, who have worked in the arts, who have appreciated art for a long time, we take it for granted. Like we know, and therefore we understand the meaning, and we're moved by it. But not everyone does it. I mean,
I think also there is a degree of snobism and a very high degree sometimes, and a lot of I mean, if you talk to like serious curators, etc., they would look really down on these collaborations with the brands or some of these things. They would say, oh, it's not intellectual, or oh, it's not this, etc. And I think that they shouldn't. And I think that, as I said, even if there's 10% of the people that somehow could be elevated or could be brought closer to art, or could discover new faces, new artists, new ideas, and in the end discover a little bit in themselves something, I think this is priceless. So that's why I'm in all kinds of way, I'm encouraging the collaborations between brands and art and artists. And also, I really advocate what I call art thinking. And art thinking is basically how we can look at business problems, at brand marketing problems, or at governmental problems, etc. And we try to solve them in the way artists would do. And I think there's an enormous value in bringing this art thinking to different domains, from, as I said, from business to science to governmental policies, etc., because artists have such an ingenuity. And again, not every artist. I talk about good artists, you know, with good head, etc.
Yeah, of course.
So that is a little quote, but. I'm also involved in the project by TBA 21 Academy, which is called Ocean in Transformation project, and that is in Venice. By the way, one of the few exhibitions maintained.
A wonderful collaboration with John Jonas.
Exactly, John Jonas, but they continue, and I think in September there will be another one that they are presenting. But what is interesting there is that how they try to look at the problem of saving oceans and the whole organic ecosystem through the eyes and the collaborations between architects, between scientists, between engineers, technologists, and artists. And I think that when we can bring to such complex questions artistic vision, that sometimes we could have absolutely incredible solutions, and we can bring innovation to an incredible level. And I really would like to cite you know, from by the way, from the little movie that I saw on LACMA website. It's called Wild Wild West by Mark Bradford, and he said that where do you think innovation comes from? Innovation comes from Wild Wild West, just being out there and saying, I'm going to do that because I want to. True innovation. Spare no time, go back to whatever road you're on. Don't worry if you have not seen it before, invent it. And that is what I mean, art thinking. Take this idea, not necessarily take aesthetics from the artist. So bring the non-aesthetic ideas of the artist and bring it and plant them into whatever field you are working. And I think that could create this grafting could create absolutely amazing results.
Not being afraid of inventing.
Yeah, but in order to do this, I think you have to be courageous, of course, but also we have to do more of these talks, and you know, there has to be more educational. I'm sorry to go back to what Francesca you were saying before, but yes, it is true. And I mean, you know, I'm proud to be, you know, part of CADAF, who is so committed actually to also have education. So as CADAF, it's an art fair, it has the commercial side, but so strongly, and this is what we are doing this panel, you know, and the viewers who are watching this panel now and others as well, this is what it's all about. We have to continue to talk about art and continue to educate and continue to also move people to a more creative, inventive way of thinking, even within businesses. But
and also making bridges and making bridges out, not insulating art within the art world. I think that is a big mistake that unfortunately oftentimes is done. That it is, for me, you know, another quote from Bradford, he said, contemporary art should not belong to, and it does not belong to any culture or any class of people. It's just ideas for our time. And I think that is absolutely key, not to insulate art within the art fair world, within the museum world, within the, you know, curatorial, egg-headed intellectual world. No, I think that of course it should exist there, but there should be bridges all over. And I think that again, life would be much more interesting, much more meaningful thanks to these bridges. And so Giulia, what you do is partly building this little bridge out there.
Yes, and I've been wanting to ask you this since the beginning, but I think it's could be sort of a good end of our conversation is, can actually digital art, because we talked about generally sort of physical art, but digital art is expanding fast, and it could create easier bridges, for example. What is your experience of what you think of sort of digital art? And that becomes also, some of digital art, a little bit of a more of immersive experience as well, like virtual reality, for example. But can digital art make this bridge, for example, easier? Because,
maybe between generations, why not? Because, well, for example, a young boy, 20 years old young boy, can interact with his father in a different way, yeah? Showing him new app, because even up to me, the art apps will be increasing, the business of the art apps will increase. So there could be a bridge between generations, no?
but also you can, digital art doesn't need to be transported, for example.
No, this is yes, sustainability. This go towards sustainability, because moving all these shows, all these pieces, all these artworks in the world, it's not so sustainable, so even the Tate is thinking about how to reduce this kind of shippings and so on. So digital art can be very easy. I mean, on computer, on smartphones, and I think this could be a bridge among generations.
Well, definitely, I think blockchain is playing an important role into that, because of the questions of authenticity and traceability, and bringing the unique aspect that has been one of the key elements of the perception of what is art. Because oftentimes, art is something that is not reproducible. And we all read Walter Benjamin, how the mechanical reproduction changed the rules of the game. Well, with blockchain, you could almost go back in time and make sure that your digital art is not reproducible, because if that's how it's described in the blockchain, you can stop it immediately, this reproduction. But if you wish, Giulia, I think your question is a little bit almost, if I may allow gently, almost does not have sense, because if we say that contemporary art reflects the times in which we live, of course, obviously, digital is an important part. Of course, all these video games or the methods that I used today, they are entering this arena, and we all know, even, I mean, speaking of blockchain, there's already a handful of artists that that work with the medium, and more and more. Obviously, virtual reality, that computer generated graphics, whatever we talk about. So I think that it's almost like useless to ask in a sense, because by definition, a good contemporary artist reflects the times in which we live, but also has a vision into the future. And I think that is the beauty, because artists are like antennas on the body of our society. They sense and they see and they predict it a little bit better and a little bit more profoundly, but also a little bit more futuristically. And as Michelangelo Pistoletto once told me when I visited him in Biella, he said, in order to to make one step into the future, you need to make two steps into the past. So they dig into the past in order to project into the future. And I think that is the beauty of the artists. So they exist a little bit. If Francesca, and I think you're absolutely right when you say we're all fluid, well, the artists are a little bit more fluid than all of us, you know, so they have a little bit more fluidity of this time travel, of the space travel, of travel into the imagination and all of that.
During the COVID, for example, I enjoyed very much an app realized by Acute Art with Corpse. You could download this sculpture, this corpse sculpture, and so you could place it everywhere you wanted. I placed it in a skyscraper or in my dining room. So it was. I enjoyed very much the fact of having apps, of having acts from Corpse or from other artists that I could play with. You know, it was very enjoyable, an enjoyable moment during this very black test time.
But I mean, thanks, thank you both. Vadim, that's okay. I mean, this is why I enjoy, you know, talking to you all the time, because we don't always have to, you know, agree, or you don't always have to say, yes, you know, great question. You can always say, well, actually, this question it's not great. So, but that is the point of having a conversation. And also, you know, being a moderator, I don't want just people to sort of agree with me. That's not, so it's great. But maybe I'm also, I asked this question also for myself because I'm a little bit new to the digital art world. It's something that I've always wanted to explore further. I knew that there were so many talented artists out there, but I think that then when you start working in a, I guess I'd say a more traditional world, sort of the brick and mortar part of the art world, then you get a little bit stuck and you never kind of then dig deeper. And what I've discovered is, you know, the power of digital art. I knew the power of art, physical art before, and now I'm discovering the power of digital art and, you know, the potential also of digital art. So maybe that was a question more for myself that I was like, oh, could this maybe help?
No, but Giulia, well, you know, I'm a little bit always trying to provocate the situation, but
that's the best. That's the best. This is how the best conversations then, you know, arise.
But then just on the final note, because I know we all have to leave, I would like to say that art and technology has always been hand in hand, and all great artists, they have been innovators, not only from choosing the innovative paints or innovative ways of using this and that, etc., but because art is defined by innovation. And I think that technological innovation that exists in the society is always reflected in the art and by the artists and vice versa, etc. So I think that in that sense, your question was totally legitimate.
No, but you're absolutely right. I think ending on this, it's very true. We tend to forget that actually, you know,
So artists are
was
and inventors.
Exactly, an inventor at their time. So,
well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So,